time has come, if your Dynasty team sucks, to rebuild it. And so we're going to go about the best way to do that today. We're going to tell you the strategy for rebuilding a team that you thought might be contending, but now you have to flip it on its head. Now you have to rebuild. What do you do? What are the steps that you do? What are the smart things to do? We have rebuilt a lot of crappy teams in our day, so we are pretty much experts on this. Let's start with the first rule, and probably the most important rule in rebuilding a Dynasty team, especially midseason. Number one, you're going to want to trade away any assets that won't increase in value from now until the end of the draft or even until the end of the offseason next year. If you have assets on your team that are decreasing in value because they're old or because they're in a bad situation, those aren't helping you. Again, the only assets that are helping you as a contender are going to be those point scoring assets, and you don't need that as a rebuilding team. So if you have guys that are scoring points, but everything else about them is declining, you want to get those guys off your roster. Again, you're trying to build a portfolio that is going to increase in value. You're trying to buy low. It is literally exactly like a stock market. You are trying to buy low on certain assets so that eventually you can get back to the point where you don't have to rebuild, where you have enough value capital to put back into your team to translate to points to win championships, to win money. So again, we're going to trade away any assets that aren't going to increase in value over the next 8 to 12 months, essentially.
Yeah, you want to essentially eliminate any risk that could be on your team, and with age comes higher risk of injury, unless your name's Kadarius Toney. Like I think if you were an owner of Nick Chubb going into this year and you thought you were going to contend and you ended up stuck with the hot potato, like that's just unfortunate. It is what it is. It sucks. And that's where we would say, like, for scenarios like that where Mike Williams goes down with the ACL or Nick Chubb with the MCL, like those kinds of guys, while it is beneficial to get rid of those guys that are going to decrease in value, Chubb and Mike Williams have already plummeted because of their injuries, and they will slightly increase in value once the offseason comes. So make sure that you're not just getting rid of every single old guy on your team. Make sure you're aware of the situations surrounding those players.
That's what I was going to ask you. My trivia was going to be, what type of team should buy Nick Chubb right now?
A rebuilding team.
Yeah. Why? Because Nick Chubb is at the lowest value point that he's probably going to be in the next 1 year, and that asset's going to go back up in value. It does not matter that he's old. It does not matter that he's injured. What matters is that he is pretty much primed to go up in value, which leads us to our second point here.
Yeah, and our second point is going to be acquire contending 2024 first. Those suckers could be as high as the 107. You're going to, at this point of the fantasy football season, are going to have at least 7, maybe 8 or 9 guys that believe they are contending and believe that they can make a push for the championship, because there really is still a lot of uncertainty. If you're rebuilding right now and you're certain that you're rebuilding, you're probably 0-4, 0-5, or 1-4. And you're definitely rebuilding at that point. But these other guys that are 2-3, 3-2, there's a lot of football left to be played, a lot of weeks in fantasy to be had, and they could think that with their record and with their chances that they could just trade away their 24 first and be a contender. I've made this mistake before, where I've been a middle of the pack team, and I'm like, if I just make one more push, I'm going to be top of the line. I'm going to be able to get this championship and be top 3. And actually, I ended up dang near dead last.
Oh, jeez.
So it sucks and it happens, but this is why you want to capitalize around this point with those 24 first. I know you want to, when you're negotiating with them, you want to say, well, yeah, this is a late 24 first, like a 110 to 112, to try and get a little bit extra there in those deals. But make sure you're mindful of that, because there's going to still be about 8 or 9 guys that think they're contending.
Yeah, exactly. And again, every contender that's selling their pick is probably not going to say, yeah, this is the last pick. You should be treating these picks like they are the 110 and 112, when in reality, there are probably 5 or 6 teams that think they're going to win the championship in your league. Again, you can roll the dice on those picks, and it's not even rolling the dice. Again, those are the only assets in Dynasty Fantasy Football that are constantly going to increase in value. So again, you could buy one of those 24 first thinking, okay, this is the 110, 111. Again, it could be the 107. I mean, that's where you were getting guys like Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison last year. Yep. Even in some cases, JSN. So those 24 firsts are going to be the best asset for your team. I think everybody knows that. 25 first, I'm going to add this as well. Don't be afraid to acquire 25 firsts as well. They will be valuable late next offseason. Think about this. Think about the value of 24 first in August of this year, before the season started. 24 first didn't seem valueless. They didn't seem 2 years away, did they? They're not going to seem that way for 25 first next year either. They're going to give you even more flexibility. And honestly, some people treat first 2 years out like they're seconds this year, which is completely,
it's bananas.
It is so wrong. I can't even tell you. So if you can get 2 25 first instead of a late 24 first, I'm okay with that. Honestly, you're getting 2 first there. They are first round picks. Next thing is going to be to buy players that people are giving up on. So I think our prime example right now is going to be Jackson Smith-Njigba, who came in. He was the the wide receiver 10 on Keep Trade Cut. That's how high he got in the offseason. And now he comes in as a rookie. He doesn't produce right away. He's playing with 2 very good wide receivers, which we thought he'd produce sooner. But it doesn't change the type of prospect he was. It doesn't change the college production record he had. It doesn't change anything about JSN. But JSN is now the wide receiver 21 on Keep Trade Cut. So those are the type of players we're looking at. Players that you personally or your favorite content creators are convicted about and saying, these guys are buy lows. You should be buying into those guys. And to go with this video, we will have a buy low video out later this week.
And Jalen Waddle is another guy that's starting to be in this territory as well, of a guy that a lot of contenders are already giving up on. I mean, he just had his best week so far was in just past week with 14 points, mainly off of a touchdown. And he's not getting a ton of volume. We expect that to go up, obviously, but it's funny to see how those contenders that invested in Waddle thinking that he could outproduce Tyreek Hill for the second straight year. Like, that was wrong again. But that's another guy that you're going to want to invest in. And honestly, if you want to be ballsy, if you want to be a little bit risky, I think T. Higgins is a good investment as a rebuild right now as well, because you're looking at these contenders that own T. Higgins, who thought he was going to be one of the top wide receivers on the roster. He's giving them absolutely nothing. You can go get him at a discount now, and guess what? There's a lot of people that are predicting, a lot of people in the Dynasty community that are predicting T. Higgins is going to get traded, or he's going to get a big contract elsewhere and walk in free agency. There's absolutely a possibility that happens, and even if it doesn't, there's going to be a lot of assumptions in the offseason, and you can probably sell T. Higgins at a premium at that point and get a market value positive move there.
And again, we'll put out a buy video for you this week so you can get some players to target. But some other examples are guys like Treylon Burks, who contending teams might have thought was going to help them this year. Guys like Garrett Wilson, who is plummeting after being in QB purgatory once again, but still does have upside if they do end up getting another QB there in New York, or if Aaron Rodgers comes back next year. But our third point, or our fourth point, whatever point it is,
our next point here is going to be, when you're trading away your contending assets, hold bidding wars. After week 6 or so, there's a lot of suitors for your contending players. And this is kind of going to go with another point. Be patient. Be patient. Even though you're rebuilding now and you know you're probably in rebuilding mode right now, going into week 6, you can wait a little bit longer. You can wait. As a rebuild, I've waited to get my contending assets off my roster all the way until the trade deadline, like the day of the trade deadline in week 14. And I'm going back and forth with contenders, back and forth with offers, and they won't give me what I want. And I'm like, okay, I hold the cards, make them sweat. Make them sweat. Go all the way to the trade deadline. It's literally championship or bust for them at that point, so they have to pay you. They have to. Don't be unreasonable. Don't be irrational, because you may be stuck with that player if you're just completely irrational. But the point is to be patient. You do not have to get these guys off your roster now. A good example of this right now is Adam Thielen. So Adam Thielen was a guy that we invested in Dynasty, even as some rebuilds, because we knew that he was going to get a lot of volume for the Panthers, and he has. And a lot of people in the first couple weeks when he got decent volume were like, hey, I'll give you a second for him. And that's a pretty good deal. That is a really good deal for Adam Thielen. I think you can get more if you wait a little bit longer, because this volume isn't going down for Thielen. You pair Thielen with another contending asset like a tight end, a contending tight end who's older. If you can pair those guys together and get 2 seconds, like that's the type of return that we're looking for. And it's fair. It really is, because Adam Thielen's on a 3-year contract in Carolina, tied to Bryce Young, who is providing plenty of volume. That's what you should be paying. I mean, well, I was looking at some of the deals that I was making as a contender last year, and it was like mid-season Nick Chubb straight up for like AJ Brown. And it sounds horrible and abysmal now, but you remember last year, A.J. Brown was very inconsistent towards the end of the season, and Nick Chubb was a league winner.
Yeah.
So at that point, it was worth it for contenders. You saw that deal happening all the time.
Yep, absolutely. And I'm going to go to the running back position here with a few exceptions. The exceptions maybe being Bijan, Brees, and now Jonathan Taylor. Maybe Christian McCaffrey, but I mean, again, you're probably going to try to get Christian McCaffrey to a contender. Do not own any running backs, like none of them, unless they're like buy lows.
Those should be the first guys that are gone off your roster.
So
I'd rather have a 30-year-old wide receiver on my roster as a rebuild than a 27, 28-year-old running back.
I mean, there are only even a handful of buy low running backs, one of them like being Zach Charbonnet, who would be perfect for a rebuild. But outside of that position, guys, that position's a mess right now. Okay, guys like Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs trying to get contracts and they can't. Guys like Austin Eckler trying to get contracts, they can't. Jonathan Taylor got a contract because the Colts pay their own. That's pretty rare. And it's pretty funny to see that happen after you all trash the Colts.
Yeah.
But again, that position right now, not good. That is the least value insulated position in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Not to mention, Bijan is an outlier. What are the odds that running backs are going to make their way in Superflex leagues into that first round again? Probably not good at all. I would not bet on that. And again, it's so volatile. It's high risk and it could be high reward. You can invest in, some cheaper running backs, and if they get a starting spot, Jaleel McLaughlin. If you picked him off the waivers, you can sell him now for whatever. That's great. But again, it's so volatile and it's so unpredictable. We're not buying into that position. And as a general rule, rebuilds in Dynasty don't have a ton of running backs on their team.
No, and make sure you're looking at draft capital as well as age at the running back position. If you have a 23-year-old running back who's, looking pretty solid, looking like he's got fresh legs and is balling out right now in fantasy, but he's drafted in the 5th or 6th rounds or after, please go and sell him right now.
So let's put this in at the end of the video here. Maybe we should have started with this, but how do you know when it's time to rebuild in Dynasty? We have played, 5 weeks now? 5 weeks?
Yeah.
How do we know? How do you know when it's time to blow up a team?
Well, if I'm 0-5, I'm rebuilding. Like,
okay.
If that is for sure. You got to rebuild.
I
mean, you have to win so many games.
And even probably 1-4.
Yeah. 1-4. And this is a situation I'm struggling with right now. I've lost a lot of close games over the past few weeks in a league where I've just ended up being 1-4. My points for are not 1-4 caliber.
That's what you look at.
But that's what I'd be looking for is if you're in that situation where you're like, man, I just got unlucky like 2 or 3 straight times and I'm 1-4, 2 and 3 even, like, let's wait a little bit. You don't have to get the 1 seed. You don't have to be a top 3 team to be able to contend. You just have to get into the playoffs. We know this for a fact. If you're the 6th seed, you can absolutely go win your Dynasty championship.
Again, we're going into the advanced standings on Sleeper, and we're looking at Max PF. And what Max PF is basically, if we were to set our best lineup every week, how many points would be scored total to this point? I like to look at where I'm at. Even if I'm 4th or 5th, but I see that I'm 9th out of 12th in Max PF, I'm like, I might be a pretender here. But if I'm 1-4 and I'm 3rd to last in the league and I look at my Max PF and I'm top 3, I'm like, I can probably ride this out. 1-4 is a little bit riskier. I think you can look at a 1-4 team with some Max PF really high and say, this is a hard hole to get out of. I got into that hole last year. It's also why you can't wait to flip. If you're going to flip a rebuild into a contender midseason, which I love doing that, love doing it. If you're going to do that, though, you need to do it earlier than later, because if you lose so many games, it's going to be really, really hard to sneak into the playoffs. I waited a little bit too long last year, had already 5 or 6 losses and barely got in, like just barely, but it's really risky. So again, we're looking at the Max PF and we're going to kind of pair that with our record, see what the true nature of our team really is. It's essentially comparing it against the league median, but if you don't have a league median in your league, then you're looking at that.
Yeah. And if you don't start winning within the next few weeks, then you can put your cards and say that you're going to.
And I would say by week 8, probably you're going to want to have made a decision on which direction you're going.
Yeah.
So that's any time in the next 2 or 3 weeks. This is really the time where people start flipping their teams and they start changing the trajectory of their teams. And again, when you're rebuilding these teams, do not go for 3-year rebuilds. Don't. Okay? Go for 1 years if you can. Go for, you get a bunch of 25 firsts, you get a bunch of players that are going to have better situations next season. You flip all those firsts in August for some good contending players, or good value in slated contending players, and then you're competing next year.
Yeah, it's rarely beneficial to trade for picks
Ever.
any further than 2 years out, like 2025. If you're going for 2026 first, like not really a huge fan of that. If you're trading for 2027 firsts, you are out of your minds. Like you just please don't.
That
do
shouldn't even be allowed.
It shouldn't even be allowed.
Shouldn't even be allowed.
Yeah.
So, all right, those are going to be our rules for rebuilding a dynasty team. If you enjoyed this type of video, please drop a like on the video. It helps us know that you enjoyed it, so we really appreciate that. And make sure you're subscribed if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. Dynasty season's starting to kick back up again, so you bet we are going to have a ton of content out for you. Make sure you head over to flockfantasy.com/domain. If you want a team blueprint for your dynasty team that's going to help you rebuild, we'll give you specific trade targets. We'll give you what your team's supposed to look like, how long your rebuild's supposed to be, which players you should be moving. We're going to give you grades on each of your position groups, all in the team blueprint. So if you want one of those, flockfantasy.com/domain. And if you choose the Mother Flocker tier, monthly or annual, we'll give you a team blueprint for your dynasty team. Like I said, flockfantasy.com and use code domain to unlock the blueprint. Thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you later.